Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of In Depth, where we speak with our CEO, Omar Sabek, over here about our Bitcoin bite-sized topics. And today, we're getting deeper into, can regulation kill Bitcoin? Omar, you have opinions.
I love this topic.
You love this topic. All right. So we know that Bitcoin can't be regulated out of existence, right? You can't regulate the Bitcoin protocol. But could you regulate it in such a way that it would affect the network? For example, targeting individuals or targeting exchanges?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But you have to ask yourself the question, why would any government want to do that? You know, and you look at governments around the world, and depending on what type of government they are, you know, they pretty much behave the way they behave on other, you know, topics as it relates to financial surveillance and privacy. So we see in China, you know, China sees Bitcoin as a threat, and China's a totalitarian state, and they want full control, and they want to monitor their people. And so they enact policies and they enact regulation that promotes that kind of vision, you know, that they have. The United States is, I think, the opposite, right? We're freedom-loving. We believe in limiting government overreach. We believe in financial freedoms. We believe in, you know, minimizing surveillance.
Right.
The idea of totalitarianism is something that's scary to a lot of Americans.
It's un-American.
It's absolutely un-American.
Yeah.
And if you look at what happened, I mean, the best indication, you know, they say, don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. Mm-hmm. You know, 2 weeks ago, in Congress, senators debated how to enact, you know, an amendment associated with taxing cryptocurrencies, and no one ever mentioned banning it. There was not a single mention of banning it or somehow trying to attack it.
Right.
It was really all about putting on an equal playing field with other, you know, financial instruments like equities and, you know, securitized products. So, you know, and that's generally where I feel like regulation is an expression of the government, right? Regulation is how the government expresses itself. And when you see that they just want to treat it the same way that, you know, we would be treating, or the same way that they'd be treating securities, you know, that's about the extent. And I think many people, you know, assessed the way the government would be reacting to cryptocurrencies, you know, in this kind of way that, you know, it's a very positive development. They want to provide clarity to the marketplace. And there's a lot of investors, especially institutional investors, that were waiting on a sideline, waiting for the government to express itself, so that they could see, you know, what the rules were going to be. They could have the clarity, and with that clarity comes confidence, and with that confidence comes investment. So all very positive.
And to be fair, China did not ban Bitcoin either. They banned Bitcoin mining, right?
Correct.
So they're not there. That is antagonistic towards Bitcoin, but it's not the same as banning it.
Yeah, and you know, so there's a couple of different theories. You know, I think and as time goes on, the theory that's taken the most shape right now is that they banned it because of the energy consumption from the central parts of China, where they're generating a lot of energy, and some of that energy was being siphoned off onto the black market by corrupt Communist Party officials to miners. You know, and that's a problem. If China wants to make sure that as much energy is getting to the population centers, and these miners are, you know, corrupting local politicians, that's a problem. But I believe that China would ban Bitcoin if they had the ability to do it.
Interesting.
I think they looked at it, they realized that they couldn't, and if you can't do it, then why even try, right?
Well, and that, I'm assuming that's a lesson taken by the entire rest of the world. Like, taking China's example, I seriously doubt that there would be a government that would even try to outright ban Bitcoin. If China can't do it, it can't be done.
China can't do it, it can't be done. Yeah, truer words have never been spoken. I mean, they're very intent on controlling, you know, they have over 1 billion people in China and have a long history of suppressing any expressions of freedom and not letting freedom run too rampant.
Right.
So it's no surprise.
No surprise. So what does effective regulation look like here, do you think?
I think it remains to be seen, you know, but so far it's treating Bitcoin and treating other digital assets the same way, you know, other investment vehicles are treated. No better, no worse. You know, and you have a huge segment of the Bitcoin community that is, you know, totally anti-regulation and totally anti, any, get your filthy government hands off my, Bitcoin.
And that makes sense because it's sort of in the spirit of Bitcoin also, right? Bitcoin's this like kind of almost libertarian, like we do what we want and keep our own stuff and nobody interferes. There's no middleman or third party to mess with our assets and our stores of value. So it kind of makes sense for the Bitcoin community to reflect Bitcoin in that way.
Absolutely. But I also feel like a lot of it comes from just some, what's the word I'm looking for? Unfounded paranoia. I don't think the government's really out to get Bitcoin or get Bitcoiners. I think the government's just out to tax it. That's what their job, that's what they feel like their job is.
Yeah.
And as long as I've been alive in the United States, you have to pay your taxes. It's not, cryptocurrencies are not a vehicle to evade taxes.
Right.
So, but there are ways that you can minimize your tax burden. And that's something that, we see products now that allow you to collateralize your Bitcoin and take loans from your Bitcoin, and those loans are tax-free. So there are ways around following the law. There are ways around, and it's one of the things that we consult our clients on. I have to do a little plug there.
Please do.
But yeah, and that's something that's very attractive.
Yeah, right.
There's this new meme that Bitcoin is digital real estate, and it's true. When you have Bitcoin as a pristine collateral, and you can use that pristine collateral as a instrument to take leverage on,
right,
and use that leverage to start a business or whatever else your intent is. That's the American way, right? That's the American dream in a nutshell. It's using the financial instruments that you have available to you, following the law,
right,
following the regulations,
of course,
and everyone's happy. And I think that's the way it's going to happen. And I've lived through this before.
What do you mean?
So, I come from an engineering background.
Right.
I was I was very involved in the migration of telecom networks from TDM networks to TDM is basically copper networks to IP networks. The idea now, everyone opens up their laptops, they make a phone call, they get on FaceTime. We don't think twice about it.
Not
but
at
that
all.
was 20 years ago, that was revolutionary.
Right.
And there was a lot of blowback from the incumbent players, the Verizons of the world. I think it was, probably wasn't Verizon at the time, it was like New York Telephone, right? But it was a big...
Before my time, but yes.
And they were the established players that were really pushing back against this new technology, this new IP-based telephony technology. And what happened?
They lost
terribly.
Yes.
They said it's unfair. This newfangled technology allows people to make calls from everywhere, and that's not fair to us.
Right.
Well, that's the way technology works.
Capitalism's not fair. What are you going to do?
You got to stay on the cutting edge.
Or maybe it's really fair.
You got to stay on the cutting edge. Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
And they weren't on the cutting edge. They fought against it. At some point, they capitulated and embraced it. I think what we see now is you look at the major institutions, Jamie Dimon famously said that Bitcoin is a fraud, and now he loves it, right? Now he's a huge advocate for it.
Right, everyone's flipping on Bitcoin.
Exactly, and when that happens, you get lobbyists to, promote legislation and promote, a more dovish view by senators and congresspeople as to how to treat it. And all of this stuff is just starting to happen right now. So it's nice to see, it's nice to see that what we kind of expected to happen is actually happening. And also back then, 20 years ago, we never saw legislation that was anti packet switch networks for telecommunications. It never happened. Even though there was lobbying against, the packet switch networks. Right. Of course it wouldn't happen because it's technology and it's not hurting anybody, and it creates jobs and it promotes a stronger economy. All great things for America.
Yeah, and value rises to the top, right? Like you can't outcompete something with genuine value that people want and utility that people want and can use.
You touched on something that's so important. It is objectively better, right? It's objectively better to be able to open up your laptop or take your iPhone,
right,
and make a call from anywhere you are in the world.
Yes.
Way better than that home telephone with the rotary dial and fixed phone with a copper string attached to it to the local central office. There was a time for that, and we've evolved. And it's the same with the financial system. There was a time for a central banking financial system, and now we're evolving. This system is way more transparent, way more inclusive, way more seamless.
Yeah.
It's objectively better on every front.
Yeah, and I think it lets us keep sight of the fact also that, these institutions that might be pushing back are supposed to work for us, not the other way around. So if they're complaining that this isn't fair, the question is not fair to whom, right?
Exactly.
And whose fairness do we prioritize here?
Right.
So are we going to prioritize big banks over everybody else? Like, who works for whom in this situation?
Absolutely. And, and people lose sight of what the bank's role is. The bank's role is to provide custody services, to provide financial access, right? And there's a disambiguation between the types of services that they're providing and the actual products on the back end.
Right.
That product doesn't necessarily need to be dollars. They could also provide services for crypto,
Right.
Bitcoin. So, I think the banks are, thankfully, the banks are wising up to it. Very slow. They're making a lot of mistakes. We can see it in real time.
Yes.
They're issuing a lot of erroneous kind of information. They haven't been in the game that long, but
well, they're like Congress. Everybody's kind of catching up to where we are now. And by we, I mean us here at Sasco Digital Assets. We saw in Congress that they really struggled to understand even the nature of crypto. Prior to even going in to regulate it, they didn't have a firm grasp of what it was. And maybe it's a generational thing. Congress is made up of older people and understandably, maybe, this kind of newfangled stuff needs a little bit more exploration.
100%. It's a process.
Yeah.
And processes take time to play out.
I mean, they should watch our videos.
They should watch our videos. Absolutely.
We literally have like dozens of videos specifically for Congress about this.
Right. That would really mainline them right into it.
Right. What is the blockchain, Congress? Get on it. It's called Bite Size.
Right. Absolutely. Again, it's a process, and I think most individuals in a broader crypto ecosystem, particularly those that are institutional investors, are looking at the politicians, take on it, and all they want is thoughtfulness.
Right.
Be thoughtful about it, right? Don't make rash decisions. Late last year we saw Steve Mnuchin try to jam through with legislation that would require, exchanges to report on anyone that was self-custodying. That's like Chinese type, surveillance.
Yes,
and that's
right.
and the blowback was swift, immediate, and it ended up dying.
Right.
And I think we could expect to see more of that.
Yeah.
I see regulation as ultimately a good thing for the industry. I see regulation as providing clarity.
Yeah.
People want to know the rules and a framework that they could operate in. And, and on the flip side, it's up to us to read the regulations, understand the regulations,
right.
and, figure out the loopholes that are in them. Or the ways around them so that we can maximize our financial freedom in light of the regulation. Right,
and in keeping with them too. So does the larger Bitcoin community agree with you? Do they think Bitcoin, because I know that there's some diehard don't regulate me's among the Bitcoiners, but what about everybody else? How do people feel about this? Do they think that regulation is low-key a good thing, or are people kind of neutral?
I think it's very hard to assess. Just like any community, it's broad, it's diverse, there's so many different views. I think one of the problems with social media, you have these big influencers that have to take, hardline stances on it, and sometimes they pander to their followings.
I feel attacked.
It's very hard.
Stop pandering. It's business, okay?
It's very hard to assess, but at the end of the day, this is a jurisdiction that we live in, right? We live in a state. That state is part of a, country where we all have to pay our taxes to the state and to the IRS. And that's just the way it's always been, short of any immediate changes. Right. It's just the way it's going to be. So I think the best we can do is educate, like you said. And really try to get our politicians and get our leaders to think about this in a very thoughtful way, and think about what the impacts would be of a heavy-handed approach to regulation. Right. And I think Ted Cruz, when he stood up, he said, I think he was, Ted Cruz.
Took us all by surprise.
Absolutely. It would hurt jobs if it was heavy-handed. If the regulation was heavy-handed, those jobs could leave the United States. Right. People will do what's called regulatory arbitrage, where they'll leave a country that has heavy-handed, regulations to go to a country that doesn't, that is more friendly to this new emerging industry. And, it's a big threat to, I believe we're going to look back at what happened in China with this mining ban, and it's going to be one of the biggest strategic failures of any country in history. Fast forward 5, 10, 15 years from now, I think China's going to come to regret that decision, because they, without really being too thoughtful about it, just kind of set themselves back in the, what is becoming the most meaningful change to the global economy in, probably since, since World War II, since Bretton Woods.
You're hitting on, I think, this inevitability that exists in all these areas, right? Like Bitcoin has an inevitability sort of sort of built into it in the sense that its underlying principles and the things that make it valuable to the people who participate in the Bitcoin network, those things are kind of almost bigger than Bitcoin itself, you know? And so as long as people find those things valuable, Bitcoin's going to continue to see growth and success. And, you know, similarly with the United States government, regulation is inevitable. That is what governments do, right? You can't have this asset that's, you know, valued at however many billions or trillions and not regulate it. So there has to be some sort of intersection between these inevitabilities coming together.
Yeah, and, you know, they will say that they want to regulate it to make it more friendly to investors and, you know, to make it safer for investors, and that's providing clarity, right? And I think the crypto industry needs that, along with all those other points that you just stated, you know. But I think the fundamental, you know, the fundamental question that, you know, anyone really needs to ask themselves is, you know, do you want special treatment or do you want equal treatment? And I think, you know, if you speak to most reasonable people, they'll say,
special for me and equal for everybody else.
Right. Right.
As a reasonable person.
Yeah, right.
That is what I would say.
Yeah, right. I think it remains to be seen. But, you know, Congress said that they were going to come back in September or sometime in the fall. They're going to revisit the amendment. Because right now the amendment, the way it's written is, you know, it's totally like erroneous. Software developers are required to report on the crypto holdings of their end users, which doesn't make any sense. There's no way that they could possibly do that.
How would they know that? And also that is kind of incompatible with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That is, you are not supposed to know about the end user if you are a software engineer.
Whoever wrote these amendments,
they just don't know.
Totally didn't understand it.
Right.
And, you know, that's why Senator Lummis, Wyden, and Toomey came together. They tried to pass an amendment to make it a lot better in terms of the wording.
Yeah.
But they were trying to jam it into the infrastructure bill. They didn't really, you could tell they weren't really giving it much thought. It was too little, too late. I think the right thing to do, come back in the fall. You know, the nice thing is we're not going to have a tax reporting season until next year. So there's a lot of time in the fall to deal with it properly. Yeah. Think about it. Have the hearings, have the debates. I think that's what Ted Cruz was advocating for.
Right.
And then,
that's what's happening.
Make thoughtful decisions and do it properly.
And the fact that Congress, that loves to kind of do their thing, is now being careful and thoughtful, maybe sort of speaks to their understanding of Bitcoin's inevitability, right? That Bitcoin's actually not going anywhere. Bitcoin's kind of here to stay. And so maybe we should be a little bit careful how we approach this kind of regulation.
Absolutely. And, you know, if they look at the numbers, 30% of Americans own some kind of digital asset. Yeah. And it's growing every day. So they really should kind of, you know, take the pulse of the country and act accordingly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I would do if I were them.
I mean, that is such a perfect bow on top of this conversation. If I were you, government, I would educate and use caution. But really, I think that's an amazing point. This probably wraps up our In-Depth.
Thank you, Karen. That was wonderful as always.
Thank you, Omar. Yeah, that was super interesting. If you guys haven't seen our bite-sized video, please check that out right away. Leave us comments down below. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think about all this regulatory opera, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. If you are not already subscribed, hit the notification bell to get notified about our truly elite content the second it comes out. And Omar and I will see you in the next In-Depth video.